Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1341 of the War News stream. And today we have very big news. We've seen Ukraine launched a drone strike on Moscow near the Kremlin, of all places. We've also seen that Russia's deployed new nuclear cruise missiles, and India and Pakistan border has erupted in live fire, and things are popping off like crazy today. And also, it is the Sunday night fundraiser stream and the last night of the stream in Alabama. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, folks, this is the final stream that we are going to be running before we are off air until November 1st during our move from Enforcer HQ 2.0 to Enforcer HQ 3.0 in Salt Lake City. And for the last night of news that we will be able to cover for around several days, today has been an absolutely major day in terms of developments in the news from around the entirety of the world. We have been able to hear major developments inside the Russian Federation, that the Russian Federation's government has declared that the Russian Ministry of Defense was able to successfully launch the nuclear-powered and nuclear-armed Burevestnik cruise missile, capable of an unlimited range due to its nuclear reactor fueling its propulsion systems, and also nuclear-armed. This missile almost operates practically as an intercontinental ballistic missile with an unlimited range, capable of striking and targeting anything within the world. While we have not seen video and picture evidence being published at this point by the Russian Federation, such an announcement of a successful launch will most likely be succeeded, largely by at this point, by video and picture evidence confirming the fact. As we have seen in prior failed attempts, the Russian Federation will quietly brush those under the rug and pretend that a test was never even attempted. In the meantime, we've also been able to hear that the armed forces of Ukraine have conducted a massive attack against the city of Moscow. So large and so significant was the attack that Russian tactical or machine gun armed pickup trucks had to be mobilized even around the area of the perimeter of the Kremlin, attempting to try and defend the city from the incoming drone attack. Strikes have been confirmed in some of the outskirts of the city, clearly showing that the Moscow air defense ring did fail over the course of the night, and that the Russian Federation is starting to see the Ukrainian drone attacks are starting to overwhelm even the finest Russian air defense systems inside the country, or at least the finest air defense perimeter in the country, which is the one surrounding the city of Moscow. In the meantime, the Israelis, or more so the Indians and the Pakistanis, are preparing to go to war again, as firefights did break out between the two sides and their armed forces along the line of contact within the Leepa Valley area. We have also heard statements from India, or generally from Indian industry, showing that they are now buying most of their oil or purchase orders from Iraq and Qatar and not the Russian Federation. Crisis has also been averted, quite fortunately, in the upcoming tariff war that was going to persist between the United States of America and the People's Republic of China on the 1st of November, as the United States and China have agreed today at a base level at completely removing the incoming punitive tariffs that were going to hike up prices by at least 100%. We have also been able to hear additional developments from inside the United States of America about other significant issues, including the impending military actions against Venezuela. While Hurricane Melissa is currently postponing most military actions within the area, the United States Armed Forces is continuing to ramp up and escalate against the Venezuelans in the meantime, although most combat activities have largely been ceased, at least at the moment. The Venezuelans are also stating that they are now going to be conducting patrols to stop any further covert operations from being conducted inside their country, although we're not believing that will really fix much of anything, at least on their end. In the meantime, the Armed Forces of Ukraine has also repelled Russian forces throughout their area, and the Israelis have conducted significant strikes today against Hezbollah inside of Lebanon. In a shocking twist of events, we've actually been able to see the first ceasefire negotiated by the President of the United States actually turn into a longer-lasting peace deal, as the ceasefire actually was a preceding to a peace deal, which was surprisingly signed today between Thailand and Cambodia and Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, which not only brought an actual officiated ratified treaty to bring peace between the two kingdoms, but also allowed for the United States of America to significantly grow its strategic and economic influence within both countries, clearly making a competition between the People's Republic and the United States of America for the growing sphere of influence within Southeast Asia, which is an incredibly good move. Nevertheless, we have a huge amount of news to cover over the past 24 hours, and we are going to be making sure to cover each and every single bit of it with the amount of attention and detail that we give every single night on air. I do once again want to apologize to everyone for the audio issues. We will most likely not have this issue again once we're back on air on the 1st of November or the 2nd of November, because the Enforcer HQ 3.0 studio should have been successfully set up by that point, or at least we're hoping for now. Still, we are going to be making sure to get through all of the major news tonight, sound issues not stopping us whatsoever, and we will be starting with our largest stories first, and then moving on down into the smaller stories throughout the course of tonight's stream. Not only that, I do also have to point out that tonight is the Sunday night fundraiser, and the Sunday night fundraiser to send us off on the long and arduous road trip from Birmingham, Alabama to Salt Lake City. Tonight's fundraiser is for Razom for Ukraine, which is an amazing nonprofit that has been helping out Ukrainian citizens inside of the state of Ukraine. Any support provided to Razom for Ukraine helps them not only to save the lives of the Ukrainian citizenry, but helps to lighten the burden on the Ukrainian government of having to take care of humanitarian interests of the state, and allows for them to focus more of their attention on the war effort and bringing the war to a concluded finish far sooner now rather than later. But with that, we are going to be moving on into the major news of the night, and that is actually going to be taking us all the way out to the Kamchatka Peninsula, as we were able to hear that the Russian Federation has announced today that they have been able to conduct the key test of the Burevestnik Nuclear Powered Cruise missile, also referred to as the SSC X-9 Skyfall. The test is reported to be successful. The missile traveled 14,000 kilometers in a 15-hour flight. While this cruise missile is not setting any speed records by that metric, one thing that it is doing is allowing for the Russian Federation to have a nuclear arsenal that is actually globe-spanning, at least in terms of its strike capabilities. Most intercontinental ballistic missiles are incredibly far in range and can reach out, in some instances, to about 12,000 miles. The issue, however, is that a lot of missiles may not have the subsequent sort of range to be able to reach the United States, or even for that matter conduct evasive maneuvers, or try and evade any form of air defense that may exist in the future. The Burevestnik nuclear-powered cruise missile is supposed to get around that by allowing for a low-altitude payload delivery system in the form of a cruise missile that has an unlimited range because of its nuclear-powered capabilities. And this is the one thing that generally is interesting about the Burevestnik, is not the fact that it's a nuclear-armed cruise missile. Those are are actually historically somewhat common. But the fact of the matter is that it is incredibly new, or at least experimental to a degree, because it is the first nuclear-powered cruise missile that has made it off of the design board and into an actual prototype, which is the one that we see here. Generally, it works the exact same as any other turbojet that would be used inside of other cruise missiles, even like the Tomahawk. But the difference is that the actual combustion chambers that you would find in a normal turbojet engine have been replaced by a nuclear reactor, which produces a significant amount of heat, heating up the air within the central part of the turbine, which then expels the hot air out of the back of the turbojet, generally, which spins these turbines back here, which then spins the front turbines at a fairly fast rate, which allows for the intake of further air. It is pretty much, in a sense, a nuclear-powered jet engine.
Honestly, am I the only one that sees a problem with this? There's a nuclear reactor at the back of the missile, according to the estimated schematics that we're looking at right here. And the reactor is literally right there at the exhaust. So how much radioactive contamination is this thing putting out when it flies through the air? I'm sure Russia's not going to tell us that, but logic dictates that it must be putting out some type of radioactive contamination because otherwise, where's it going? It has to be expelled from the rear.
I don't really know. And on top of that, folks, we actually do not know if this thing spews out a stream of radioactive material behind it as it flies. We don't actually know. And that's something that's been a great concern to many people around the world, is the kind of ecological concern that this thing has, considering that it's practically salting the earth wherever it flies over, if it's starting to expel any sort of radioactive particulates into the air as it flies. We do know that U.S. cruise missile designs all the way back from the 1960s that brought this up as a concept actually were not able to mitigate the radioactive debris being exuded out of the exhaust and then settling into the ground below. So we do not know if this cruise missile has the exact same issue as our older, at least design concepts had, that were come up with on paper by the U.S. Air Force and the Department of Energy way back in the 1960s. That is a little bit unclear at the moment, but the fact that the Russian Federation has stated that this thing is usable and that a test was successful, we are generally assuming that at this point, the information is most likely correct. The reason why we're saying this, folks, is that in reality, the Russians really have nothing to gain from saying that this thing was a successful test. We have seen multiple times in the past that the Russian Federation has attempted to test new missiles like the RS-24 Sarmat, which ended up exploding on the pad, and instead of just announcing and lying that the test was successful, they announced and lied that there never was a test and that there was no reason for a test to fail because they hadn't even planned one. That lets us know that if the Russian Federation had seen a failure of the Burevestnik, it's highly likely that they would have never even announced that there was an attempted test or a plan for a nuclear-powered cruise missile at all. The fact that they were announcing this means that there is some sort of clear proof out there that they will either be able to show or that our intelligence forces were able to analyze that confirms that this missile does exist. Another thing that's also fairly important to remember for everyone is that as far as the Russians lying about this, it doesn't change the nuclear strategic situation in any sort of a meaningful way. The Russian nuclear forces and their ICBMs, along with their tactical nuclear weapons, are still aimed at NATO forces inside of Eastern Europe, and also their strategic nuclear weapons are still aimed directly at the United States, and they could lay waste not only to most, if not all, NATO forces within Europe and the Americas, but they also could lay waste to the United States as well if they ever wanted to. This is just a different delivery system to create that very same result. So generally, there isn't a benefit for them to lie about this because it's not like saying we can now blow up the United States with a nuclear bomb within 2 minutes, which actually would be something that would be incredibly scary. Not only that, this missile flew 14,000 kilometers in 15 hours. That is a fairly normal cruise missile by all standards. Its speed is somewhere with around 600 miles per hour or so, which is nothing that's too crazy. I mean, that's, fairly standard for cruise missiles. So it generally operates like a cruise missile. It's just that it has an unlimited range. And those can be intercepted and shot down if detected by air defense systems. So any air defense system, as a matter of fact, can actually intercept and shoot this missile down, meaning that it's a lot weaker in theory than you would actually think it is, at least by the statement alone. Unlike an ICBM, which there still really is no effective way to intercept ICBMs at scale, you can actually intercept and shoot these down at scale all day long. As a matter of fact, a large part of the U.S. Air Force, made up of the F-15s, F-16s, F-35s, and F-22s, could easily engage and shoot down these missiles from dozens of miles away and even spot them on radar. So generally, I would have to say, while the Russian Federation has made this into a big deal and they're acting like this is the nation-saving weapon of the Russian Federation, it really is easy to defeat, honestly. And on top of that, it really does nothing rather than make a conventional cruise missile unlimited range, which really doesn't matter because it's not like they're trying to blow up the United States on the moon. So what does it matter if it can endlessly fly? That doesn't really have a hill of beans of difference to anything. It pretty much might as well be the same as firing a conventional cruise missile that is also nuclear armed. But moving on out of that news, and generally out of the Burevestnik in general, we did see that the Ukrainian armed forces did make a response to the Russian Federation's growing actions and aggressions, at least to the point, inside of Moscow today. But before we get on into that, I do want to make sure to ask you all about this nuclear-powered cruise missile and whether it really is a serious threat to the West or not. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so Russia was bragging like crazy today about this new nuclear cruise missile that they have, which they're saying, some people are saying has a 14,000 kilometer range, and some people are saying it has unlimited range. So I guess 14,000 kilometers sounds unlimited to me, so I'm going to sort of say that sounds true, but is it a real threat? Because Russia's making a huge deal out of it. So 36% said no, it's Russian propaganda and a complete joke, while 28% said yes, it's the real deal and very ominous, and 25% said it's serious but not very critical. So the thing is, this is not a new concept, but Russia seems to be the only country in the world that believes it's a concept worth developing because they're desperate. So I think it likely is real, but the problem is, and the big question, how many of these things can they produce? And also, I view this thing as a nuclear missile, because if it has a nuclear reactor on board, imagine if an air defense shoots that thing down. You're going to have radioactive contamination literally falling from that missile. So what makes this different than a normal tactical nuclear weapon of some sort? It sounds pretty similar, to me at least. I would say it's very similar in concept. So I would say it's serious, but it's not critical. Because if they only have one or two of these things, it's not that serious. But if they start mass producing them and actually start fielding them, that could be very, very bad. So I'm with the 25%. And Enforcer, what say you?
Some people in the chat have actually been saying that the idea of a nuclear-powered cruise missile is unreal and it's just physically impossible. I'm actually here to tell y'all that this idea is roughly 60 years old, and it's nothing new at all. As a matter of fact, the United States under Project Pluto actually designed and tested two individual nuclear-powered ramjets to see if it was possible to create a nuclear-powered cruise missile that could attack the Soviet Union. Literally, this project was going on in the midst of the Cuban Missile Crisis and was canceled just a few years later. This is nothing new, and we actually did find out that these nuclear-powered cruise missiles worked, but the thing is, folks, is that the project was canceled because ICBMs rapidly evolved to pretty much defeat any other concept of a delivery system. Why in the world have a cruise missile that takes hours to fly to the Soviet Union and can also be shot down fairly easily even by 1960 standards when you could just fling an ICBM at the Russians and within 30 minutes it's obliterating several cities with its multiple independent re-entry vehicles that are slamming down into St. Petersburg, Moscow, and so on? It made it completely obsolete in concept and was completely pointless. And this is something, folks, that is actually a little bit funny about the BRICS countries as a whole, if we wanted to lob them all together, the Chinese, Russians, and so on, is that they take technologies that in theory and by testing are about 60 years old. Like even hypersonic missiles are 60 years old in concept and testing, and then they just start to field them in large numbers in the modern day, and then people completely forget why in the hell that was an abandoned idea back in the day. Hypersonics are pointless for multiple reasons. Not only that, these nuclear-powered cruise missiles are also pointless because of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Intercontinental ballistic missiles are literally the most superior way of delivering the maximum destructive nuclear payload in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of a chance at interception. So these sorts of missiles are just completely pointless in the modern day. And I don't really know, folks, why people put so much emphasis in these old trinkets coming back around, because we tested them. We tested them, folks, way back in the day. We were the first country on the planet that came up with this idea, and we abandoned it because the Trident II and the Minutemen ICBMs clearly trumped this thing in every single way in their abilities, the amount of payload that they were carrying, and also the speed at which they can make it to the Soviet Union, or in the modern day, the Russian Federation, and hit their targets. So I would generally have to be honest with y'all, folks. I just don't really see the whole hype around the Burevestnik, and to be honest with y'all, the thing is honestly a gimmick. Think about it. Let's think about it for a minute. So it can fly an unlimited range. That's great. That sounds so cool. But the problem is that if there is a Patriot battery in LA, say, that's sitting around Los Angeles or San Diego, and they happen to see one of these things fly over the Antarctic and start coming at Los Angeles from the south, guess what? That Patriot battery is going to fire a missile at that cruise missile and shoot it down. The missile might not even be armed at that point, and also the radioactive damage may be incredibly small to the local area. So pretty much it doesn't mean anything to anyone. It was pretty much a completely pointless missile to implement and operate. The Russians might as well be flinging a conventional cruise missile at folks like an Iskander or a Caliber and expecting that to get through. And those have an incredibly low chance of making it past Western air defense systems already. So what difference does it make if the missile flies 400 miles and gets shot down, or 500 gazillion miles and then gets shot down anyways? It's going to get shot down either way, so it doesn't really make much of a difference, in my opinion, either direction. I would say the Burevestnik...
One thing I'm wondering is why has Russia not released a video of the test? Because I looked around and I couldn't find any video showing this thing being launched, showing it flying, or showing it falling down from the sky. I have not seen any video of any of that happening. So Russia usually likes to release all these propaganda videos, just like North Korea does, when it comes to testing new weaponry. So where's the video of this? All we have right now, based on what I've seen, is Putin's word that the thing flew, and that's pretty much it. So how do we know the thing even really flew? We're kind of taking Putin's word for it right now.
We're taking their word for it because a statement that a test like that is successful, generally that is never made, even by the Russians, which lie profusely, unless if a test actually was successful. Because we have seen multiple times, and you've been around as well, Matthew, to see these. Whenever the Russians are about to test something, and we see it on satellite photography, and we know they're about to test something, and then it fails, either it blows up at the pad, or it blows up the pad, or anything else in between, they will just brush those under the rug and not even mention them and pretend like they never even happened. Whenever they're successful, though, they will immediately state that the test was successful, because it's more so of an escalatory step and allows them to kind of threaten people around the world when one of these launches is successful, and then eventually, probably within the next 2 days, they'll most likely show receipts and start to show video proof. A lot like the fact that we heard about that nuclear test recently with the Russian ICBMs, and that actually was only reported 2 days after the fact, even here on our channel, because they hadn't published any video or picture evidence of those launches or tests until about 2 days later, which is when we reported it, because we finally had the video and picture evidence. So considering that this statement was made today, and the last statements by the Russians were accurate and then proven 48 hours later by video and picture evidence, we are assuming that their statements are accurate here as well, and that they'll most likely publish some video or picture evidence within the next 2 days. That's at least what I'm assuming.
Yeah, and also, by the way, the timing on this, it seems like it's a response to the Tomahawks potentially going to Ukraine. It seems like that's what Russia's trying to do here with this, because we had heard rumors that Russia was going to test a nuclear-powered cruise missile, which it was just like this one. In fact, it might actually be this one. We heard they were going to test that during the Zapad exercises, but they actually held off on doing that for some unknown reason. Maybe because it didn't work. That could be one possible reason. Or maybe they were going to hold it in the cards until now, until they needed to do it for leverage reasons. So honestly, it sounds like they're trying to maybe scare the U.S. from sending Tomahawks to Ukraine by now releasing this information. But once again, no video yet. So until we see a video, we're having to take Putin's word for it. And that's very shaky, because Putin has all the reason in the world right now to lie about that and to make the West scared to send Tomahawks. So I'm a bit skeptical right now, personally. I'm going to take it at face value, but I'm a little bit skeptical at the same time.
And also, I just saw someone say, so the missile can fly unlimited range and swerve away or around or under radar. You can't really fly under radars anymore, at least here in the Western world. Our radars have such a low altitude, at least at its minimum catchment area for its radars, that missile would have to be literally flying about 100 feet above the ground, which none of them do that, to be able to be undetected by an air defense system like a Patriot. On top of that, another thing that you also have to remember is that the United States Air Force would be flying combat air patrols with their air search radars on, meaning that that thing will pop up, even flying at low altitude on the air search radars on those aircraft, and they'll be able to engage it and shoot it down. Also, on top of that, if the Russians launch, we also have the FIRMS satellite system, which detects any launches inside the Russian Federation and would be able to confirm to us the location of the launch, and then we can further corroborate off of that information what kind of launch it was, and likely deduce that it was a cruise missile that was fired. And that is something that we can even take a little bit of a minute figuring out, because this missile would take hours to reach the United States. It would actually take about 8 hours usually for that missile to actually reach the United States. So not only could we sit there and figure out that a missile was fired, then all go for a lunch, maybe hang out and do some karaoke, and then come back to flying the planes and shooting down the incoming missile, but we could also do a whole bunch of other stuff as well, like shoot the missile down directly, or directly retaliate against the Russian Federation outright before their nuclear weapons even hit hours later, before we even shoot them down. So generally, this whole thing is an absolute gimmick. People fall for gimmicks a lot these days, like the hype in America is unreal about this nuclear-powered cruise missile. But even if this thing is successful, it's completely pointless because there are 9 million different ways that you can completely immobilize this threat before it even reaches the United States of America at all. But moving on from that and on into the rest of the news that we have for the day, we also were able to hear as well, speaking of some other developments, that according to the Telegraph, Russia is amassing nuclear weapons and attack submarines in the Arctic Circle as it prepares for war with NATO, according to the Norwegian defense minister. They have stated that Oslo has detected increased weapons development on Russia's Kola Peninsula, where its prized northern fleet and parts of its nuclear stockpile are based. He also said that Putin was trying to gain full naval control over the Arctic region, so he could block NATO's access to 2 key shipping routes that would resupply Western forces in maritime. Generally, trying to ensure that the Russian Federation will be able to interdict Western shipping and try and conduct a greater blockade of the European portion of NATO in the outbreak of war. It is becoming fairly clear that the Russians are trying to flex their muscles at least a little bit, but unfortunately their muscles are the inflatable kind from the store, and they're deflating a little bit quickly, but they're still giving it a chance and trying at least to look like they're somewhat intimidating. In the meantime, the Ukrainians really intimidated the Russians today inside of Moscow. We were able to confirm that as of today, one of the largest drone attacks that has ever hit the Moscow city area just happened, and it appears that it actually almost hit the Kremlin as well. The attack was unbelievably large. Let me show you all at least the documented drone flights of Leotis over the Moscow area. We can actually see several clear attack corridors flying directly over Domodedovo and into Moscow, while several other drones were trying to make it through the Moscow air defense perimeter, or at least distract them here on the western side, with another large group bypassing the Moscow air defense perimeter completely and making it pretty far on into the city. We were able to confirm that at least one drone around the area of the Kommunarka city area within the city of Moscow was an impact, or a successful impact at least, as smoke was rising within the area. And we also were able to confirm by geolocation that it appears that the smoke was rising from somewhere around a forested tree line within this direction, possibly suggesting that the armed forces of Ukraine may have hit an air defense system, or that the drone may have been shot down, still landing within the area nonetheless. In the meantime, we also saw another clip of the massive attack that was ongoing right here.
Damn, son.
Dang!
Same old Russian car alarm sound. You gotta love it.
Man, I gotta be honest with you, man. You gotta love the car alarms. The car alarms are the national bird of Russia. We also saw some other more interesting developments, at least around the Moscow airfields, as multiple airfields started to conduct mass evacuations near Moscow of the aircraft within the area, sending them on to greener pastures further east inside the Russian Federation. Also, it appears that the drone attack was so large and significant that they had to roll out the machine gun guys on the pickup trucks, even right outside of the Kremlin. This told us that things were really bad, at least in this drone attack. Apparently, Russian air defense perimeters on the outskirts of the city were being overwhelmed so heavily by these drone attacks that the Russian Federation actually had to move in truck-based tacticals to prepare to try and directly shoot down the drones through machine gun fire before they were able to hit the Kremlin or any other government buildings within central Moscow. This is also a little bit of a funny picture, folks, because the Russians love to pretend like they are the most advanced and capable military on the planet, and for some reason, although they're saying that they're incredibly advanced, capable, well-funded, and well-trained, they're now having to whip out what appears to be some form of a Nissan pickup truck with a PKP Pechnik on the back and try and shoot down the drones as they're making their way into the central area of the capital city. That's not really a good look and doesn't really look like a first world military, to be entirely honest with y'all.
Yeah, and also, by the way, it's like if something gets through all those outer perimeter air defenses that they have around Moscow, because Moscow is one of the most heavily defended areas inside of Russia, outside of Putin's dachas and his mansions. But outside of that whole mansion situation, Moscow has layers of air defense, like proper air defense. So this must be like a last resort. If something gets through all of those air defenses, then they bring out this cheap truck with a machine gun on the back, which seems like a pretty pitiful last line of defense, if I'm being honest here. And also, it looks like they just pulled it straight up in the middle of the street, like in the median. So, that's pretty lame, honestly. This is protecting the capital of Russia. This is lame.
Honestly, man, this would be like the United States coming under attack, and the U.S. Capitol building is being protected by some good old boys on the back of their pickup trucks with some double-barreled shotguns. Like, this is the equivalent of that if the United States was in the same position. This is an absolute embarrassment for the Russian Federation. I've never seen anything like this in my life, especially from a country that's ever tried to claim that they're the second best military on the planet. And not only that, they could go toe-to-toe with NATO. They can't even go toe-to-toe with a weaponized RC drone. So I'm highly doubting that they can go toe-to-toe with anyone on the planet, for that matter, in an actual war. Still, it appears that while this was going on, the Russians did make some statements. For one, Lavrov did state that whenever anyone talks about a ceasefire, we know that they just want to buy time, generally showing that the Russian Federation never viewed ceasefires as an actual attempted peace, especially on their end, and they generally just looked at it as playing the West whenever a ceasefire was proposed by the United States, or by Ukraine, or by anyone else in general. We also were able to see the statement by Putin about the successful launch inside of the Russian Federation of the Burevestnik. I'm actually going to let y'all listen to this clip because, of course, we have to listen to Putin, who is, of course, descendant of old Rinky Dink the Wise, who is the founder of almighty Russia and the great Russian people who have been the greatest people in the history of the planet and have never done anything wrong, and everything that they do is always justified. Nevertheless, here's the clip.
Стратегические силы, способные обеспечить национальную безопасность Российской Федерации и союзного государства в полном объеме. И мы уже тоже говорили об этом. Это факт, который всем хорошо известен, всем специалистам в военном мире. Так называемая современность наших вооруженных сил, вернее, сил ядерного сдерживания находится на самом высоком.
Wow.
Also, by the way, I got to interrupt real quick. Why does it look like Putin's sitting at a veterinarian's reception desk or something? This is like the reception desk they have at the vet, like when you take your dog in or something like that. That like mahogany wood or whatever, the wood like a little veneer in the front and stuff like that. It's like, where is this even set up?
I don't even know, man. Also, what is that background banner behind him? That thing is just ugly. Look at that. I mean, that is the worst looking banner I've ever seen.
Yeah, honestly, and also, isn't it cute how Putin's cosplaying as a soldier, like by wearing this little rinky-dink uniform right here? Like, it's cringy.
Dude, he has to wear the uniform, man, because Rinky Dink the Wise wouldn't have done any less if he was in this position. But beyond that, I want to read this one out to y'all as he says it. Let's see here. As is well known to all experts in the military world, the so-called modernity of our armed forces, or rather our nuclear deterrence, is the highest level. Now, that is an absolute lie. That is the stupidest claim I've ever heard anyone make. The Russians just got defeated yesterday, not by the army of Ukraine, but a puddle near to Shikove, north of Pokrovsk. They're not saying that the military is at the highest level. If your army can be defeated by a standing puddle of water south of a small village, then you just generally cannot claim that the armed forces are at the highest level. On top of that, they can't even claim that their nuclear forces are at the highest level, because around 50 to 60% of all Russian nuclear tests that have been conducted since the war in Ukraine have ended in actual catastrophic failures, usually with the missiles exploding either right after launch or exploding on the pad. So their nuclear deterrence forces aren't even second to none or at the highest level. It would actually be the United States, because the United States, when we conduct a nuclear test, we have never sustained a failure, at least over the past few years since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. All of our nuclear missile tests have been 100% successful, with no failures at all over the past 3.5 to 4 years. But we'll let Putin continue as he digs the grave of factuality, at least in the speech.
Ну, наверное, можно без всякого.
And you know what? I'll read it for y'all since he's really quiet. So let me go back and continue where we left off. Well, perhaps one can say without any involvement, it is at a higher level than, at a minimum,
Всех ядерных.
all nuclear states.
Теперь по
Now,
поводу,
regarding the exercises
по поводу того учения,
that was
которое
conducted, I would like to
я
ask the
попросил
Chief
начальника
of the
генерального
General
штаба
Staff to report
доложить еще и
on one
еще
more
одно
event.
событие, это коротенько.
I mentioned him so
Ну,
briefly
в
in my opening
Речь
remarks.
идет о,
We were talking about testing
испытании
the
крылатой ракеты неограниченной
Burevestnik
дальности
Nuclear
Буревестник
Powered
с
Cruise
ядерной
missile
энергетической
with
установкой.
unlimited range. I know that I have a report
У меня есть доклад.
from the industry side, and in general, I'm aware of the
В целом, мне известно,
assessments of the Ministry of
что
Defense.
Министерство обороны это все-таки
This
уникальный
is,
изделие,
after all, a
которого
unique
в
product
мире
that
ни
no
у
one
кого
else in the
нет.
world has because it's stupid. But that's the statement by Putin, and it does appear that they are parading around this stupid nuclear-powered cruise missile like it is the second coming of something. I don't even know at this point, but they're acting like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, which is absolutely dumb. But
Also, by the way, what is that speaking voice that he's using? Like he's like mumbling, like cruise missile. It's like what the hell? It's like he's like announcing like a historic or a quote unquote historic missile test, and he's like mumbling like it's like he just like discussing some macaroni he ate for supper or something like that. It's like what in the world is this presentation?
dude, he went up there and he said, I have to tell you about the great rinky-dink the wise and this nuclear powered cruise missile that you would be very proud of. It's a historical thing. You see, back in the year of 800 AD, Prince of Rinky-Dink the Wise once said, build me a missile and I will control the world. In the modern day. And he just goes on like that endlessly. Every time he talks, he always has that stupid voice going on. And on top of that, he also has these stupid antics. Like, he's very full of himself to the extreme. But still, quite annoying nonetheless, but still trying to hype up the Burevestnik. Anyways, moving on from King Rinky Dink, or whoever the hell Putin talks about endlessly, it's actually this guy, he's Prince Yaroslav the Wise, but the guy is absolutely just overblown by Putin. I could go into a whole historical rabbit hole as to why, but I will not do that because I'm not Putin, and who gives a damn, really? The guy's been dead for 1,000 years. He has, like, no impact on the modern world hardly at all, rather than being a name from 1,000 years ago. But beyond that, a lot of people have been talking about that major attack that Ukraine conducted on Moscow today, and will Ukraine strike Putin here in the future? Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so you have to admit the attack today on Moscow was getting on the verge of making me wonder if Ukraine was about to strike some central targets inside of Moscow that they haven't hit before, because we saw for one of the very few times the internal Kremlin air defenses were activated, which were those very cheap technicals that you saw on the street. That was one of the few times we've ever seen picture evidence of those ever being activated. So we saw how the major attack was literally all enveloping Moscow, it was literally all around the perimeter, and we were wondering, were they going to strike the Kremlin? And that's the big question. Is Ukraine going to eventually do that very, very soon? And 47% said yes, Ukraine is getting to that point, while 26% said no, that's a step too far for Ukraine, and 18% said it's a 50-50 chance of it happening. So I would say personally, that is a step too far for Ukraine, because at the same time, while generally the Russian nuclear threats are usually a bunch of hot air, they still do have nukes. And I truly believe that if the Kremlin was struck by a large Ukrainian attack, that would likely trigger a tactical nuclear launch. That would be the one thing that would probably do it. So I don't think Ukraine's going to take that risk. So I'm with the 26%. Largely, I would say the Kremlin is mostly off limits just for that reason of uncontrolled escalation happening after the fact. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would believe that the Ukrainians are most likely never going to strike directly at Putin or the Russian government, at least with the intent to kill, because that will most likely cause an endless amount of escalation and an extreme escalation at that point if that was conducted. So I have a feeling that that target is generally off the table for now, but maybe put on the table here within the near future. But with that, I hope that does address that the best we can, at least in our opinions. And unfortunately, folks, we were able to hear that the Vilnius International Airport has been shut down again for the 4th time this week. It's been shut down for more days this week than it's been open, as more balloons were spotted flying towards the airport from Belarus, making it clear that this is no action of smugglers any longer. This is a directed campaign against Lithuanian airspace by Belarus or Russia with these continued balloon flights into their skies. Not only that, we have also been able to hear that the United States Air Force was conducting more info-gathering operations with an RC-135 rivet joint within the area that was trying to sniff out some interesting particulates, at least at the time that news was reported earlier in the day. In the meantime, Russia has also flown another IL-76 from Moscow to Tehran. We do not know what it's carrying, but we're believing that it is some form of Russian equipment that they were trying to transport to the Islamic Republic of Iran to help them out with the future war that they will be having for the second go-around against the State of Israel and the United States of America. And generally, that is most, if not all, of the major Russian developments of the day that's really affected everyone either in Europe, in Central Asia, or elsewhere for that matter. And I gotta say, folks, that the Russians, they're getting a little bit too big for their britches. They're trying to pretend like they're a world player, but the only thing that they're a great player at is getting played. I have not seen the Russian Federation actually amount to anything on the world stage at this point, rather than the fact of being a minimal nuisance. But it does seem as though that the United States of America does view the Russian Federation generally as a nuisance. And it also appears that we have started to make them at least their situation, a little bit worse due to the fact that they're a nuisance. We were able to hear news out of the Republic of India today that India is now buying far less oil from the Russian Federation, and purchase orders are now being filled instead from Iraq and Qatar, generally meaning that the Russians are now being slowly eked out of the Indian oil markets, at least at the moment. And we already know that this is following along with the Chinese oil markets, which are also shrinking for the Russian Federation as well, as it does appear that they're trying to generally avoid the sanctions that the United States have put on the Russian Federation and their oil exports, especially from Rosneft and Lukoil, which are the two largest oil producers inside the Russian Federation. This is something that may also be quite beneficial, at least for today, is that the trade war has been averted, at least for now, with the People's Republic of China. Chinese and U.S. officials tentatively agreed to avoid the 100% tariffs today, which I have to be honest with y'all, was a very good move. I cannot describe to y'all how apocalyptic that would be if the 100% tariffs actually went into effect for any long period of time, even several months. That would cause irreparable damage, not only to the United States of America, but to the People's Republic of China. At the same time, folks, we do have to remember that while we want to put our rivals and adversaries in bad positions, both financially and strategically, we still cannot do that at Pyrrhic costs, where it's also costing us the same amount of damage and loss here within the United States of America. So a good thing to see that that trade war was averted, and we may also see that due to that, the United States of America may leverage the good relations with China at the moment to try and force the People's Republic of China to ensure that they are not purchasing any large numbers or any sizable number of Russian crude oil, which once again will be putting the Russian Federation in a difficult financial spot. We also have been able to hear, speaking of that news, moving us on into the area of the South China Sea, a fairly interesting occurrence today that's been happening, well, not really today, but over several days, on the USS Nimitz. As Reuters has reported that the U.S. Navy has lost an F-18 and a Seahawk helicopter, which both have crashed in the South China Sea earlier today while operating from the USS Nimitz. All crew members were safely recovered, and there were no fatalities or injuries, from what we understand, that were significant involved in these crashes. But it is something to say the least that an F-18, a F-18 Super Hornet that is, as well as a Seahawk, which is the Navy's version of a Black Hawk helicopter. And let me go get that really quickly for y'all. This is a Seahawk of the U.S. Navy. Both of these were lost today. They were not lost to any sort of combatant action, meaning being shot down. They were not lost due to those reasons. It appears there was some forms of technical error or pilot failure, possibly, that led to the loss of the vehicles. Still, not a great day to see, and not really a good look for the United States Navy, especially considering that the USS Nimitz is on a patrol in the area, attempting to power project for the United States of America against the People's Republic of China, and the endless efforts by the Chinese Coast Guard and the Chinese Navy to expand their sphere of influence within the South China Sea, and for us to be seeing that there is a large amount of vehicular attrition in the form of lost helicopters and aircraft, at least over the course of a day, it's not really a good thing. Still, this does happen from time to time. The military is not without faults, and these things have been known to happen over the decades endlessly. But at the same time, considering the situation this has happened in, it's not the greatest look. Also, I saw Plant Lore say maybe they collided. They did not. We do know that, but I believe it was Indo-Patcom that came out with a statement about the situation, and they did state that there was no in-air collision that led to the loss of the vehicles. It appears to have been some form of a failure, either on the pilot's end or the actual mechanisms of the aircraft's end. We're not really sure which one it is, so it may have been that an F-18 overshot the arresting wires and was not able to recover, and it ended up pretty much just belly flopping into the sea right in front of the carrier. And there also is the chance that the Seahawk may have been lost just due to some sort of mechanical failure, considering that its very close relative, the UH-60 Blackhawks, are already seeing a higher amount of vehicular critical failure rates, at least within the U.S. Army in prior years. So that's also likely that the Seahawks may be suffering from just generally being an aging airframe. Still, it's a very interesting fact that this did happen nonetheless, but it is great to hear that the pilots were recovered, and hopefully the instant investigations and instant reports will at least enlighten the Navy as to why these particular incidents happened in the South China Sea today. Still, there was actually huge news to tell y'all that came out of the South China Sea, and I will actually have to say that we're going to have to eat our foot on this one, at least me personally, because we have criticized for a while now what we have been calling cheap ceasefires, which are ceasefires that are forced without fixing any underlying issues. For the first time ever, while most of these ceasefires have completely failed, we have actually seen the first one that has succeeded in not only becoming a ceasefire, but also becoming a ratified legal treaty framework that will now be bringing peace between two countries. And those, crazily enough, are the Kingdom of Thailand and the Kingdom of Cambodia. As many of y'all will know, we covered the incident with the border war that occurred between the two sides, as tensions have existed for decades within this area over who controls a small temple along the border. And I'm trying to find that temple right. It's actually the Preah temple right here, and who in the world controls it. Thailand claims they control it, the Cambodians claim they control it, and generally they get into firefights here and there over who actually owns and controls the Preah temple. Recently, that boiled over into a full-blown border war with a large amount of casualties, especially on both sides. The Cambodian military and generally the Thai citizenry that came under mass barrages by the Cambodians. And a ceasefire was forced by the United States between the two countries without fixing the underlying issue, which generally, from what we have seen from the track record over the past 10 months, that usually does not end too well. Usually it only resolves the conflict at least for several weeks or several days before it devolves back into full-blown conflict. Crazily enough, though, this is the first one that we've seen that's actually worked, as the President of the United States today actually was a part of a treaty that was signed between the Kingdom of Cambodia and the Kingdom of Thailand, not only bringing a actual peace treaty between the two sides, but also allowing for the United States to grow significant trade relations and military relations with both kingdoms. So not only did the United States actually resolve the war at this point, at least by ratified treaty, which is a real peace, 100%, which is a great thing to hear, we also were able to strengthen the United States' strategic positioning through our economic and military connections, both to Cambodia and to Thailand simultaneously. So this is actually a fairly good move. I would actually have to say that while the foreign policy over the past 10 months has generally been unsatisfactory, in my opinion, to a significant degree, this is practically a masterclass, at least this one particular incident, of creating a very positive-looking American strategic position within Southeast Asia. We already have fairly decent relationships with the People's Republic of Vietnam due to our heavy trade relations with them, but it also appears that we are seeing that we are now growing our relations with Thailand and Cambodia, which the Chinese have already been trying to court, at least diplomatically, for their favor and alignment into the Chinese sphere in recent years. So while we were able to curb Chinese growth of their sphere of influence within Central America around Panama, we are now seeing that the United States is also growing our sphere of influence directly right on China's southern border within Southeast Asia. So I'd actually have to say, folks, this one turned out pretty good. This is actually a little shocking, and I gotta say, Of course, we're not political here. The analysis is straightforward. When the foreign policy is bad, it's bad. When it's good, it's good. Believe me when I say this was actually a pretty damn good move. Like, I actually was quite shocked to see how this turned out, and to also see that for once, a ceasefire that was generally forced pretty much just for the fact of having a ceasefire actually evolved into a meaningful peace deal that not only brought peace into the region, but has grown the United States' influence within Southeast Asia a good deal more, at least by the details of the treaty that we were able to hear about today. But with that, it's about time for us to start moving on into the rest of the news that we've gotten from inside the Middle East, inside of East Asia, and also from inside of Ukraine. But before we get on into all of that, I do want to make sure that we take a little bit of a breather to get to talk about the fundraiser, because we are more than halfway there to reaching that $2,500 goal. Truly unbelievable and impressive. And I've got to say, folks, that I hope that the Lee Spring Army tonight can rally together and raise the fundraiser to the goal. We are only about $1,000 away from the $2,500 goal, and Ransom for Ukraine is an absolutely amazing nonprofit. They have been saving lives in Ukraine longer than the invasion of Ukraine from 2022 onwards has been going on, and their work has been absolutely incredible, especially over the past few years, in providing humanitarian aid and assistance to citizens who have found themselves pretty much on the front line, and also they have been helping out these citizens once they're able to escape the front lines and largely are found generally homeless, as their home is now in the middle of an active battlefield or within occupied territory. The fundraiser is an absolutely phenomenal thing because this fundraiser goes to directly supporting Razom for Ukraine and their efforts on the front lines. Not only that, it also helps the armed forces of Ukraine to generally get more attention and focus from the Ukrainian government, because through our collective fundraising actions to the humanitarian efforts of Razom for Ukraine, the Ukrainian government is able to take its attention and focus away from that humanitarian effort, because we're the ones helping to carry the load, and focus more of their efforts and funding on the military, and hopefully allowing for the Ukrainian state to continue to push the Russians out of Ukraine and to also eventually bring the war to an end eventually sooner rather than later. And so I've got to say, it's an incredibly amazing thing to see that the fundraiser is now at a whopping $1,700.
Oh, damn.
And Matthew, give us the names of the top donors of the night who have helped in a big way in making this possible.
All right, so reading off our top donors so far of the night, we had a 200 from Espen Turgenhagen, the largest one, and a huge shout out to you, Espen, for that very generous support of the fundraiser.
Hey!
And also a big shout out to Danny B, who put in a $100 donation, that is. I'm getting all mixed up here, but huge shout out to Danny B for that generosity. Also, a huge shout out to Hal Rose for putting in a 100 as well, along with Active Vista and Humble Tracker, as well as BC Skyman, and also Greg Carrier put in a 50, and Bobby43 put in a 50, along with Numerian, James Hughes, Danny B yet again, and also that's a super chat there on the last one. That's mixed in there. But a huge shout out to all of our top donors of the night, and also a huge shout out to everybody else for donating to help to get us up to $1,763 raised of the goal. And we're getting super close to it very quickly. But Enforcer, what say you?
And a massive shout out to Samuel Szymanski as well for throwing in an incredible $50 donation. On top of that, we have to give a huge thanks to each and every single one of y'all who has supported the fundraiser tonight, whether we were able to call off y'all's names or not. Y'all all make up this amazing Lee Spring Army and help this channel to continue to not only run every day through y'all's support through the super chats, but to also help out on the very news that we cover from around the world. It's a truly amazing and incredible sort of a thing to know that 1,341 days in, and on our last day before we take the daunting trip to Salt Lake City to set up the new HQ, we are still seeing that the Lee Spring Army is banding together and getting us on up to the fundraiser goal for none other than an amazing nonprofit like Razom for Ukraine. And I got to give y'all a massive shout out and thanks to each and every one of y'all so much once again, because y'all are making it possible for a lot of Ukrainian citizens to be able to have another hot meal, to be able to have a roof over their head, and to be able to continue to know that the Western world and our way of life will continue to persevere, hell or high water, and we will also make sure that they're around to see that one day. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, folks, it is time for us to move on into a couple of questions, because we have been running this stream and this news generally non-stop tonight for an hour, and 75,000 people have watched the stream just within that first hour, and there was actually around 17,000 people here live at the peak. I mean, that's truly amazing and incredible to know. And also, it's even more incredible to know, folks, because this is the last stream that we're going to be running for a little while. Just to let you all know, since we have a lot of people here still, the Enforcer channel is going to be out of business, at least for a couple of days here within the near future, this upcoming week. We are actually going to be in the process, starting tomorrow, first thing in the morning, of getting ourselves from Birmingham, Alabama, all the way to Salt Lake City, where we're going to be setting up the new Enforcer HQ. And also, Enforcer Man clarified, I'm sorry, folks, I'm exhausted right now. That wasn't really the best wordage. We are not going out of business. This isn't a going out of business sale. Like, we're not, like, giving away the golf tees and everything for free. Like, that's not happening. We are just...
Yeah, I thought for a minute there you using the out of business language. I was like, what the hell is he saying? Like, what is he saying right here? No, we are not going out of business, and we are staying on the air. It's just a temporary, momentary channel ceasefire. That's all it is. We're only going to be off the air for about 4 or 5 days. It's going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we should be back on Saturday, which is November the 1st. That is our goal right now. So really only 4 days off the air if you don't count Monday, which we're always off anyway on Monday. So it's only a small little bit here, a small little bit. Some are saying the smallest bit, but I must admit though, I'm exhausted myself. Like, we are powering through this thing to bring y'all the stream tonight. We did not want to miss the Sunday Night Fundraiser stream. We are known for this on Sunday, and we did not want to miss it because, of course, it's very good to raise more money for Ukraine as well. We did not want to miss the opportunity on another Sunday.
Bro, I just made one of those presidential blunders that makes the stock market plummet there for a second. I was like, oh my god. And we're going to be off air, folks, from the 27th of October, which is going to be tomorrow, all the way up until the 31st of October, which is going to be this upcoming Friday. We are planning on being back on air on Saturday, November 1st, for our next stream. But in the midst of that time, we will not be making any short war videos or live streams. Practically, for some people, this is going to be the Enforcer apocalypse, because there's not going to be any Enforcer content coming out during that time. But considering that there will be a little bit of a break and a hiatus, I always want to encourage folks to go out there and learn something. Go get a very interesting book about something that affects you in your daily life every day, whether it be electricity production, logistics, how businesses work, how the economy works, how global trade works. Go get an interesting book on something like that, and take the time while we're off air to read that book if you can, or listen to a documentary that largely explains the same thing. Make sure to use the time well, because the Enforcer channel will be back on air, hopefully on the 1st of November, and we will be continuing this news coverage like we do each and every single day. And also, Ozzy said, what if all hell breaks loose? Well, that's a good question. Like, that is a good question. We are hoping it's not. So we will be hoping that that will not happen, and we're hoping that all of the stars have aligned out there generally, that nothing crazy is going to be happening while we're gone, because we know that a lot of y'all count on us to be able to cover this news every day, and a lot of y'all use this as your primary news source now. And we take that quite seriously, and we do want to be on air, so that way, if anything major happens, we can cover it. Unfortunately, during this period of time, though, from tomorrow to Friday this week, we will not be able to cover anything, whether it's large or small, because we are going to be pretty much in an 18-wheeler every day, driving across the country is the best way to put it. So with that, I hope that addresses that the best we can, just to let you all know once again about what's coming around, and make sure to spread the word, folks, because if people haven't heard it yet, they need to hear it right now. The Enforcer channel is not going out of business. We are just going to be off air from Monday to Friday, which is generally unprecedented for this channel. We've rarely ever been able or have done that. But this is for a very important reason. It is moving the headquarters, and that is a very important deal. All Lee Spring Army soldiers must make sure to keep the home fires burning, because we will be back on air on the 1st of November once the stream rounds out tonight. And so with that, we are on to the first question of this segment.
All right. So, also, by the way, to mention this real quick, the Morse code was the same as last night, but a huge shout out to all of our Morse code decoders of the night that always decode our Morse code. But it was the same, actually. We did not get the chance to change it due to some technical glitches in the background, but it was the same. So, a huge shout out once again to the Morse code decoders. But moving into our first live chat question, this one goes to Oscar Meyer Russian, who said, any update on the Nimitz incident?
We were able to get an update from Indo-PACOM. It appears that both of them were vehicular or pilot error related incidents, which is usually considered to just be standard attrition rates. But considering that both of them happened on the same day, that's generally what made it a fairly concerning sort of a development, at least one that made the headlines. So, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, and we are on to the next question of this segment.
And this one's going to go to OK State, who said, did you see the F-18 and helicopter crash today in the South China Sea, only 30 minutes apart? And what do you think that's about?
We did see that. We actually just covered that in the last question in this segment. And generally, it appears to be some sort of a fluke. Really, we do not know of anyone shooting them down directly. And Indo-PACOM did not state that. They stated that it appeared to have been some sort of mechanical or pilot error that was involved in the crashes, at least initially. But once these things happen, they have to conduct a full investigation into each incident and find out the actual reasons as to why the aircrafts ended up in the water and the pilots ended up having to be rescued by a rescue helicopter. So generally, I would have to tell you that unfortunately, beyond that, we don't really have further information on that incident. And so with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news for the night.
All right, and this one is going to go to Mopar Queen, who asked a question about the move real quick. I was going to grab this one as our third one for the first segment, and Mopar Queen said, any fun stops on the way to Utah? And sadly, not any fun stops, I'll be totally honest. Like, it's going to be a very, very fast trip. Obviously, we got to take breaks, so we do have to stop for that. But if it weren't for the breaks, them's is the brakes, we would be literally going nonstop for the entire way. But it's a long drive, 33 hours all the way across the country to Salt Lake City from Birmingham, Alabama. That is a hell of a drive. When we picked up our truck today, they were like, oh my God, that's a drive. I was like, hell yeah, it's going to be a drive and a half right there. But it's going to be interesting though. We're getting to see a lot of America that we don't usually get to see. So very fascinating. We're driving through a lot of interesting areas that sadly I can't get into too much about it until after the trip's over. But very interesting stuff. Sadly, no fun stops. I guess the rest area will count as a fun stop. But Enforcer, what say you?
Unfortunately, we just don't have anything that's going to be fun. And I will tell you all the exact route and roadmap that we'll be taking here. We will be going through the following cities: Jackson, Shreveport, Dallas, Albuquerque, and also Flagstaff. I'm just kidding. We're not going
You
to
mother
those.
trucker.
You mother. Fix your shit. Don't remind me of that guy, man. You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy. But that's actually not the trip we're taking, folks. That's not the roads we're taking. It's a totally different route. It's somewhere in between the Gulf of Mexico and the border of Canada. That's the general area in which we'll be traveling through, heading out to Salt Lake City. We can't get into particulars, folks. I wish we could, because I know that a lot of people would be really hyped to know that the enforcers are passing through, even if it's in a moving van. I have a lot of people who be like, oh my God, the enforcer's in our area. Unfortunately, we cannot say due to operational security issues, because there are a lot of really crazy, angry people out there, and we generally do not want them to know where we are on each day that we're on this trip. So unfortunately, we can't give you all any specific details, at least for now, where we're heading. But once the trip is over and we're in Salt Lake City, we will be getting that information out to all of y'all about actually where we were and where we passed through. And also, if we ever happen to run into any of y'all and you hear our voice, considering y'all don't really see our faces, but y'all hear our voices a lot, if you hear our voice at a rest stop or a hotel or wherever we are in between, and you think, hey, is that the enforcer? It's okay to ask. Like, you can come out to us and be like, hey, are you the enforcer? And we'd be more than happy to say yeah and say hello to you. And, of course, tell you long live the Lee Spring Army, because that would be really cool to meet y'all on the way if a chance happens to allow that. But still, I hope that does address that the best that we can. And also, man, I'm not kidding, man. Jackson, Mississippi is like the Birmingham, the Montgomery, Alabama, Mississippi. Everyone in the chat is like, yeah, I would just drive like straight through Jackson.
Man.
The best way to see it is through the window.
Man, I remember. I actually drove through Jackson. I was on a different trip for business out toward Texas. Actually, one of these times that I actually did not mention on the air before. But I was heading out to Texas for some business, and I went through Jackson, and I stopped there to go get Chipotle because I was like, I'm finally in a place where I can finally get Chipotle, and it's going to be probably hopefully decent. So I got out, and I was like, okay, here. I'm not sure what these gentlemen over here are doing, but. Let's just say they were engaging in some unsavory activities right outside of the place. I was like, that's not good. And then all of a sudden, some more individuals pulled up, also engaging in some very unsavory activities. And things started getting loud. And I was like, okay. Do I really want Chipotle that bad? And I said, nah, I'm going to pass. I got in the car and headed out. But Jackson's sketchy. Like, I'll admit, Jackson's like where we grew up, honestly. Like, the crime rate there, it's pretty rough. Like, it's pretty dangerous, too. So, I was good. I don't like the drive from like Birmingham, Jackson to Texas. I cannot stand that drive. It's tough.
You know, on the other hand, though, one thing that's really cool, folks, if y'all don't know this, is that the original interstates actually are numbered in a very particular way, and I'll actually share this with y'all really quickly because this is a cool fact y'all can take with y'all to the grave if you wanted to for some reason. But anyways, the interstates are numbered in a particular way from north to south and east to west. The most furthest south original interstate, and there's a whole bunch of caveats to this because a whole bunch of additional interstates have been added to the original ones, but you can tell the original cross-country spanning ones because every single one of them traveling east to west is named in the tens in even numbers. So Interstate 10 goes all the way from Jacksonville, Mississippi through the United States all the way to Los Angeles in a straight line east to west across the country. Interstate 20 does the same thing, just a little bit further north. This one starts, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around Florence. Yeah, it actually does start in Florence. It starts in Florence or generally around this area, and then it goes all the way across the country. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this one ends up somewhere out here in the Midwest, if I'm not mistaken. It ends out here somewhere. Actually, no, it meets up with Interstate 10 down here near Pecos, Texas, and then goes on through the rest of it. And then every single one of them that goes north to south is also a 10 number, but ends with a 5. So Interstate 85 or Interstate 65. Interstate 65 goes from Mobile, Alabama, I believe, all the way up to Chicago, and so on and so forth throughout the country. So Interstate 5, right over here, this is the furthest west interstate that goes all the way from the northern part of the country, from Seattle, Washington, and all the way south to Los Angeles. And all of them are numbered that way. So it's incredibly cool. You can generally get around or generally kind of know where you are in America and where you're heading on the interstates just based off of the number of the interstate that you're on. But then there's a whole bunch of other caveats to that. Like, for example, Birmingham has Interstate 459, which is just a ring road interstate that circles around downtown Birmingham, so that way you don't have to go through downtown and deal with the congestion and traffic there. And there's a myriad of different examples like that. And also new interstates like Interstate 22, which just don't follow that numbering convention at all. But still a pretty interesting fact nonetheless about the original interstate system and the numbering numerology that they had to let people or drivers know where they were and where they were heading. So a pretty cool little fact about it. But anyways, with that, I hope that was an interesting tidbit that y'all can share with your friends at another cocktail party here in the future. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on into the rest of the news for the night. And I gotta be honest with y'all, folks, I hope that we haven't sounded like this at all, but I am dead exhausted tonight. I don't know if y'all can tell. Hopefully y'all cannot. And I feel like I've blown through the news really quickly tonight, as a matter of fact. That's kind of why I'm bringing that up right now, because I just started to realize we really only have 2 tidbits of news to cover in the Middle East, and then we move on into Ukraine, and then it's almost over at that point, except for the Caribbean news, which also is something that we have to cover as well. But anyways, we are going to be moving into all of that news, starting off with Pakistan and India, as it does appear that the two sides will be getting possibly back into a full-blown border war, as we were able to hear of firefights around the Leepa Valley area between the Army of Pakistan and the Army of India. And here's the clip right here. Just faint little explosions. And that is, once again, letting us know, at least at that minimum, that there are firefights going on the line of contact. This may devolve, considering that any firefight that happens can devolve into a full-blown border war because of the tensions between the two states. This could devolve into a full-blown border war between Pakistan and India. We are not entirely sure if that is going to be happening here in the future. We do not know. But it is quite clear that the two sides are going to be possibly going at it once again because of the border war and water situation that's been permeating within this area for months and months on end. And a lot of people have actually been considering the chances of a new conflict between these two countries and what they're thinking about it and what their 2 cents are. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so we did see, and also hear as well, excuse me, that there was some clashes being reported on the border between India and Pakistan, and we do know that India has been making some wild statements as well, saying that Operation Sindoor is never over, and it's not over, and they plan on getting Pakistan again to get even. So what are the odds of a new conflict starting between those two countries? And it looks like most people, 63%, said it's very high odds, while 21% said medium odds, and 8% said very low odds. So I would say personally, it seems like both sides, both India and Pakistan, want to get that conflict going again. So unless the U.S. suddenly jumps in the middle of it and forces a ceasefire, I would say the odds are extremely high that a new conflict is going to start between those two countries. It technically really never ended for the most part because we're still seeing skirmishes even to this day, but it could get out of control if more of these start happening. So I'm with the 64%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would agree with the 64% as well. There's incredibly high odds due to the tensions that exist because of the Indus water treaties and the fact that they haven't been reinstated. The Pakistanis are pretty much going to have to go to war with India at some point to reopen the flow of water into their country, considering that India is not willing to negotiate with them. Also considering the fact that the Indian Ministry of Defense is continuously stating that Operation Sindoor is not over, and they're considering their attacks on Pakistan to be unfinished, also due to the fact that they were embarrassed in the last India-Pakistan border war, it does appear that India is also spoiling for a fight with the Pakistanis as well. So I would generally have to say the chances are fairly high at this point that the two sides will be going back to war at some point here in the near future. Meanwhile, moving on out of the Indian subcontinent and on into the Middle East, we were able to confirm that the Israelis have conducted further strikes within the area of the Baalbek area. We were able to confirm this puny-looking explosion. It's so small it doesn't look Israeli. But apparently Israeli forces carried out an airstrike at the Budeh village in western Baalbek, and it does appear that that is a continuing development, at least within the area. We have not been able to hear of any further developments within the Gaza Strip as of today, or the continuing Israeli strategic position against the Islamic Republic of Iran, or the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps proxy forces within Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, or western Yemen. Still, moving us on out of that and on into the rest of the news that we've been able to get, we were able to hear that the USS Gerald R. Ford is now weighing anchor and is en route from Split, Croatia to the area of the Caribbean. It is expected at this moment that the USS Gerald R. Ford may arrive somewhere in between November 4th to November 10th within the area of the Eastern Caribbean, depending on the speed. And Hal Rose just threw in a $333 donation, bringing us up to $2,336 on this fundraiser. We are insanely close, folks, to hitting that fundraiser goal. We're just about $164 away from hitting that fundraiser goal. And I would hope, folks, oh my, what?
I was hyping up.
Oh, and we are wildly close to hitting the $2.5 thousand goal. Can we do it? Yes, we can. Can we do it? No politics. But if y'all got that joke, hopefully y'all did. But still, it does appear that the Gerald R. Ford is going to be a little ways away. And that's no big deal, at least for now, because it does appear that Hurricane Melissa is becoming quite strong. We did send a WP-3D Orion into the hurricane today, south of Jamaica, Hurricane Melissa, to try and gather some information about it, and it does appear that the hurricane is rapidly gathering strength. We actually got this footage, interestingly enough, from the International Space Station passing over the hurricane earlier today, and it is quite clearly a strongly formed hurricane. As of today, I believe it is a Category 3. Here within the next few days, it is expected to become a Category 5 and also make a landfall in Jamaica. So this is quite a significant weather element, and due to the fact we are getting rain here in Birmingham, unprecedented. Oh my goodness, we hit the goal!
We hit the goal! Jogga,
Let's go, baby! Let's go!
Hey, come on, man!
We the best, but beyond that, it's
DJ
absolutely
Khaled.
man, DJ. But beyond that, we have hit $2,700 on the fundraiser, thanks to unbelievable support from everyone in the Lee Spring Army, including Barky Bark Dong, who threw in $200, and Bobby43, who threw in $167. Those two together have helped us to be able to rocket ourselves on over the goal and on to $2,700, along with everyone else's donations over the course of the night. I have to give y'all a huge congrats because the Lee Spring Army has once again been able to pull through and not only get to the fundraiser goal, but race well past it. A truly amazing and incredible thing, and it's a wonderful thing to know that the Lee Spring Army will never truly die, and that our ability to support and maintain assistance to Western and American interests will persevere well on into the next decade, I would hope at least. But still, a massive congrats to all of y'all so much once again, and we will be, of course, giving a readout of the top donors once more once the news segment rounds out. Moving on out of Hurricane Melissa and the absolute maelstrom of support that just came through for the fundraiser at the exact same time, a wild coincidence, we also were able to hear that Venezuela is now going to be working, at least according to their Ministry of Defense, on stopping possible covert operations. I don't think they can do that. I just think that's beyond Venezuela's abilities. And also, it's kind of a little stupid and dumb sounding to say that they're just going to start trying to stop that instead of actively trying to stop that 24/7. You'd think that's something they just generally do, considering that's the Ministry of Defense, and that would be a part of defending the country. Anyways, the USS Gravely arrived just a couple of miles off the coast of Trinidad and Tobago today, and it's also a couple of miles away from Venezuela at the exact same time. So it does seem at the moment that U.S. military forces are getting very close to Venezuela, actually within spitting distance almost. And I believe that the sailors of the USS Gravely will spit in Maduro's direction. But still, it does appear that we are continuing to use our naval assets in the area to intimidate the Venezuelans and try and entice them, and actually trying to lay a finger on the United States, because if they do, we'll invade them. I think we're pretty much going to invade them anyways. It's just a matter of time at this point. So it doesn't really matter if they do anything or not. We're going to invade them anyways. But if they do something to us, it gives us kind of a little bit of a better justification in responding. Anyways, moving on from that and on out of the area of the Caribbean, it's also time for us to move on over and on into Ukraine to also cover all the significant developments that have been happening on the front lines here. Moving us on down into the general direction of our front lines, we were able to get the casualty report from Miss Disa. A massive shout out to Miss Disa, because the Kyiv Independent didn't publish the casualty report for the day. But we were able to see that over the course of the day, these are the estimates of Russia's combat losses according to the Armed Forces of Ukraine. As of October 26, 2025, day 1,341. Troop losses are low again, but October average is still above 1,000 a day. 18 APCs is increasing, and October total is higher than the past 3 months, which is good to hear. Over the past 24 hours, we were able to confirm that 900 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed, along with 4 main battle tanks, 18 APCs, 15 artillery pieces, 214 operational and tactical vehicles, or just generally vehicles, or drones more so, correction, and also 81 cars and fuel tankers. So it does appear that the Russian Federation's armed forces has once again taken significant losses at the front line. And we were also able to see a decent reason why. The Ukrainians hit the Grafovka Dam a little while ago and hit it again today. In this clip right here, you can clearly hear it and see it.
Вон она ударила. Попали.
Oh, wow.
Прям в плотину прилетела.
Mega.
Right into the dam!
Еще один летит.
Damn! And there's another one coming.
В машину попали.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Oh, and they found it in the discount aisle.
Ловил.
Oh, and another hit.
Сколько их там? Бля, тут вообще заряженный.
And there's another little glimpse at the dam from another angle, heavily pixelated. We also were able to see the damage at the dam, and it was not good.
Oh, wow, that is not good at all.
Yeah, that's not good. It looks like the dam was actually breached. We'll get into a second what this has actually resulted in as far as damage. Касачный. Бля. So, many of y'all are probably wondering, what has this done inside of Ukraine, considering that this dam actually feeds directly into Ukraine? Well, actually quite a lot. From what we've been able to hear, and here's another clip of the dam rupture right here and the flow of water coming out, this has been more so of a gradual release than the catastrophic Novokakhovka dam explosion, which is a literal wall of water that then raced down the Dnieper River. As a result of the strike on the Belgrade Reservoir located inside of the Belgrade Oblast, we have been able to understand that it's caused serious logistical problems. After the dam broke, water flooded the Severetsky Donets River, which is downstream of this dam, blocking supply routes and flooding Russian positions. The Russian brigades 128th, 116th, 68th, and 136th downstream are now under threat of flooding, including personnel and equipment. Also under threat of flooding were the positions of units of the 6th Russian Army, namely the 68th and 69th Divisions and the 44th Army Corps. Now, something that's a little bit interesting about this is, if I'm correct, the 68th and 69th Divisions are actually on our map. And they are. So, apparently, these are actually inside of Ukraine at the moment, near to the area of Vovchansk. So we actually might have to move this entire combined arms army from the Leningrad military district here on the force disposition map and down there to accurately reflect where they are at the moment, which also would suggest, if that information is correct, that the Leningrad military district, especially around the area of St. Petersburg, has been heavily stripped of fighting forces, at least at the moment. But moving on out of that news about the major dam rupture that happened in that area, and further down the line and into the Lehman direction, we also get to see the Russian Federation being turned back within this direction, but apparently that's a little too spicy to show. So we'll move on down to Velika Novosilka and show you this clip instead of the Russians getting hit down here by the Snakehead Brigade, or the 61st as they call them.
Also, by the way, the poll has returned. There was a slight error on the poll. It was worded like maybe I might have had a stroke and wrote it. It was a little bit off. So it's back now, and I think it's right. I think it's good.
Look, Jack, you gotta understand. You see a tank, and then you the water tank, the heater, right turn, left creep, walking on that heater. Kids gotta ask whether a man is on the moon or anyway. You gotta know about it.
And if your kids want to ask you those aliens are real, you tell them. Anyway, go play with those turtles.
A kid has gotta know what his turtle is doing. Like it is a constitutional right. Anyway. Look,
I remember I'll go outside and go play with the fish outside. I'll get the garden hose and drink out the garden hose. You used to get a little H2O out of the garden hose. Put it in a garden hose in your mouth and drink the water. Anyway.
Look. There's this guy in my neighborhood when I growing up in Scranton. His name was Hannibal Lecter, and look, you need people. What's wrong with it? Anyway, look, what's wrong with eating a guy? You know what I mean? You know, that came out wrong. Forget it. Anyway, you gotta ask, why in the world is there spaghetti in the Czech store? That Czech mix. That's what's supposed to be in the Czech store. Why is it there? What's it doing? The trade war with China, the soybeans. But anyways, moving on from that, it is time for us, folks, to move on up, surprisingly enough, really early tonight, on up into Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1341 of the Wire. And so, let me get this in full screen mode.
Man, Zelensky's looking like me. Honestly, that's how I look for real in real life right now. I look that tired.
Honestly, I am about as tired as this as well. But with that, it is time for us to get to the speech. So without further ado, here is the speech. Peach!
Вже завершився сьогодні розбір завалів на місці влучання російського шахеду по будинку в Києві. Відночі працювали рятувальники, було доволі тривалим і гасіння пожеж. Станом на зараз на всіх локаціях роботи завершені, і тільки сьогодні тільки у Києві від російської атаки 3 людини загинули. І ще 31 людина постраждала. Серед них є діти, 7 дітей. Ми дякуємо кожному, хто допомагає людям, кожному рятувальнику, всім в комунальних службах, хто дійсно працює, щоб допомогти. Тільки за один цей тиждень росіяни застосували проти України майже 1200 ударних дронів і вже 50 ракет різних типів. Більшість якраз балістичні. Захист від такої загрози може бути тільки спільною справою. Жодна нація в світі не має залишатись наодинці проти такого. І за цей тиждень ми ще наблизились до необхідних рішень. Була моя розмова з канцлером Німеччини. Також ми говоримо з десятками інших партнерів в Європі щодо Петріотів. Окремо я хочу подякувати Британію і Францію. Є рішення Франції щодо додаткових винищувачів «Міраж» для України та ракет для ППО. Британія допомагатиме нам з ППО і надалі, теж ракетами і у виробництві дронів, перехоплювачів. Дякую за це. Є також нові рішення про внески у програму Pearl, Фінляндія та Іспанія. Це програма, щоб купувати американську зброю, ті ж такі ракети для Петріотів. Ми чітко працюємо над цим, чітко працюють і наші оборонні домовленості з європейцями. Ми готуємо нові проекти, буде більше нашого спільного виробництва зброї, і щоб світ міг говорити з Росією з позиції сили. Ми самі в Україні маємо бути на сильних позиціях. Важливо завжди порівнювати, що росіянам наказували зробити і на яку дату, і що вони насправді змогли. Український спротив справді героїчний. Я дякую кожному, хто в бою, на бойових постах, хто тренує, хто допомагає нашому захисту. Я дякую кожному, хто працює на оборону та заради нашої держави. Цими днями є хороші новини від наших українських десантників. Наша 82-га Буковинська бригада на Покровському напрямку. Дякую вам у Мирноградській громаді. І кожен такий результат на Покровському напрямку зараз це надзвичайно складно, але надзвичайно важливо. І саме там, проти Покровську, росіяни зосередили основну свою ударну групу. Це значна кількість військ окупанта. Звісно, це дає складну ситуацію і в Покровську, в усіх сусідніх районах. Жорсткі бої всюди, і на підступах в місті, є ДРГ в місті, і важко з логістикою, але треба і надалі знищувати окупанта. Треба і надалі завдавати росіянам якнайбільше втрат. Російські плани їхньої наступальної кампанії за 10 місяців цього року вкотре були розвалені завдяки сміливості саме наших воїнів. І всі строки, які їм Путін визначав, російська армія не витримала, і це не вперше. Багато зроблено в рамках добропільської операції. В цих районах є суттєве поповнення обмінного фонду для України. Я дякую кожному солдату, сержанту, офіцеру, які воюють там, на Донеччині. Також в Куп'янську, на Запоріжжі. Все це допомагає нашим позиціям в дипломатії. Дуже допомагає. Загалом нашим відносинам зі світом. Завдяки вашій силі, українські воїни, світ надалі має силу, має мотив тиснути на Росію за цю війну. Тиснути, щоб Росія була змушена цю війну закінчити. Хочу відзначити за результати на фронті цього тижня, окрім вже згаданої 82-ї бригади ДШВ, також підрозділи 1-го штурмового полку, 25-ї повітряної десантної бригади, 33-ї механізованої бригади і також 4-го батальйону, 71-ї єгерської бригади, 92-ї штурмової та 93-ї механізованої бригади, а також воїнів 132-го розвідбату. Дякую всім вам. І це Донеччина. І також за бої на Харківщині. Це в Куп'янському, передусім, відзначу наші підрозділи нашої 127-ї важкої механізованої бригади. Просто молодці воїни. Олександрівський напрямок, 414-та бригада безпілотних систем. Дякую. І також 5-та штурмова бригада, 225-й та 425-й окремий штурмові полки і 141-ша механізована бригада. Дякую вам, воїни. Дякую всім, хто розуміє, що саме на фронті, саме в оборонному виробництві, саме в стійкості наших людей реально здобувається можливість не тільки України, а всієї Європи зберегти себе та захистити нормальне життя. Дякую всім, хто з нами. Дякую всім, хто з Україною. Слава Україні!
Meanwhile, on
Героям
Zelensky,
слава.
Slava, and meanwhile on Zelensky's phone, Master Zelensky, I just heard that you need Tomahawk missiles. It's a great thing that you called. I'm sending this voice message to you to let you know that we're training up some Ukrainians to hit Moscow with a Tomahawk. It's going to be very great. We're calling them Golden Hawks because they're going to, talk to a Russian, and it's not going to be good. I got to tell you that. And speaking of that, talk to a deal and hawk to a, I got to be honest with you, we're really spitting on the Russians these days, spitting straight facts. The Russians, they have no economy. They're broken poor. They have no money and they have no military. People look at their military and they go, sir, their military, it couldn't be worse. And I go, absolutely, it could get way worse. The worst that anyone's ever seen, the lowest ratings. Nobody wants to be in the Russian military. When people go up and go, who's in the Russian military? It's nothing but their worst. It's their criminals. It's their poor and the homeless. All those sorts of people. They're all in the military. And obviously poor people are not nice people. We all know that because I live in a mansion made of gold. So it just makes a lot of sense like that. It really does. But outside of that, a lot of people have been talking to me about, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do? The news is over. That low rating enforcer news. Everyone hates the enforcer. Nobody likes him. He's really stupid and he talks a lot of crap. But beyond that, it's time for us to move on into the question segment where we get to talk to all of y'all about all kinds of fun stuff like, why is it blue? Why bad thing when good? And also another important one, where in the world is the moon? Like, why does it only show up at night and not in the day? Very questionable. And then sometimes it does show up in the day, and I go, wow, look, it's there in the daytime. That's crazy. I just don't know what's up with that. It's like a dad out to go get milk. It shows up sometimes, and then it runs away, and you just don't know where it went. Where did it go? I don't know. But with that, it is time for us to move on into the question segment, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, is it going to be an absolutely incredible and fun time. We get to talk about literally anything and everything. But one thing I will let y'all know, folks, is that we cannot talk about four things: religion, politics, whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare, or climate change. And I know some people are going to go, wait a minute, you just did a voice of the current sitting president. Isn't that political? And to that, my dear Watson, I say no. Because we actually do the voices of all people in politics, left or right. So generally that gets a pass because it's pretty fair and we don't hold any bars. Like, we just ended up getting grilled by some people in the chat because to some people, the Trump voice is hilarious because they don't like him. But then when we do the Biden voice, it's not funny because they like him. And then vice versa. So, it's fair. It's a fair political sort of a deal. We just end up taking shots at everyone fairly. But at the same time, some people don't like that, and then they want to say that we're like some sort of like a communist or a fascist because we made fun of their guy and they don't like that. So, they're going to have to get with it. Anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the question segment at large. And Matthew, I got to ask you, do we have a lot of people talking about that current poll that's up in the chat? And what are they thinking about it? And what are you thinking about it? And what's the world thinking about it?
All right, so jumping into our current poll, it says Russia's Belgorod Dam appears to have failed, causing major flooding, and was this strike appropriate? So 67% said yes, Ukraine was right to strike the dam, while 14% said I'm neutral on the strike, and 10% said no, Ukraine is wrong for this. And in this one right here, I'm a little bit mixed on it, I'll be totally honest with you, because typically dams are off limits in war. However, at the same time though, Russia struck a ton of Ukrainian dams, and we've seen that on footage multiple times over. And I would say at some point, Russia can only do so many bad things until Ukraine has to respond to it. So I'm going to say I'm neutral on this strike. I don't necessarily condone it, and I don't say it's wrong either. I'm kind of right in the middle, so I'm with the 13%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would surely have to say I would be with 67%. Considering that this dam is right on the border with Ukraine, about 5 or 6 miles away, striking this dam only was affecting mostly territory inside of Ukraine at this point, so I'd generally say they were justified. It's a lot like blowing a dam for defensive purposes in any other area in Ukraine. So, although it was technically inside of Russia, the actual effects were downstream inside of Ukraine. So, generally, I believe they were mostly justified in conducting sort of an action. So, I'd be within the 67% for that reason. But I hope that does address that incredibly well. And, folks, I'm going to tell y'all something. Tonight has been absolutely crazy. I don't know if you know this, Matthew, but in an hour and a half, actually, 94,000 people have watched this stream. Have you known that?
I did. I saw it right now. It's a lot.
That's a lot of people. And I got to tell y'all something, folks. Me and Enforcer Matt are absolutely spent. And I don't mean to bring that up to just, like vent to y'all about how tired we are, but we are quite tired, and it's not going to be getting any easier because we have to get up at the crack of dawn again tomorrow, which doesn't sound like a big deal. But when you usually go to sleep at 4 o'clock in the morning, like I do and like Enforcer Matt does, getting up at like 6 is a big deal because you usually only get like 3 hours or 2 hours of sleep, and that's what we've been doing for the past few days. So we are most likely going to be answering questions until the top of the next hour, so about the next 20 minutes, and then we're going to be rounding out the stream for the night, so that way we can get off air and get to sleep, because tomorrow starts the road trip. We've just been packing and cleaning this entire time up till now over the past 3 days, which has been a whole thing in itself. And now we're going to have to get to driving about 9 to 13 hours a day. So that is going to be a whole challenge of its own. And I want to make sure, especially for myself, because surprise, surprise, everyone, I'm the one having to drive the van, which is not small. It's like an 18-wheeler. So I want to make sure that I have enough sleep that I can get behind the wheel of that thing tomorrow and not run it into a ditch where the Enforcer is on RIP t-shirts. So with that, folks, we are going to be answering questions until the top of the hour, and then we're going to be rounding this thing on out for the night. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right. And also, by the way, a huge shout out to Robert Krogan, by the way. Robert Krogan put in a $6 super chat and leveled it out to $3,000 even right there. And a huge shout out to you, Robert. I like that. I don't know what I was about to say there, but I like that.
Thank you so much. Thanks. That was great. That was incredible.
Thank you so much for the round numbers, or big fat round numbers, and thank you so much for that. But honestly, though, it looks very nice. $3,500 above the goal right there, and a huge shout out to everybody for that. But also, by the way, we do have our top donors since the last time. A huge shout out, by the way, to Hal Rose, who threw in that 333, and also Barky Bark Dog, who put in that 200, and Bobby 43, who threw in a 167, and John Best, who put in a 50. And a huge shout out to all 4 of y'all for helping us to reach that $3,000 figure right there. And we do appreciate that very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, a truly incredible and amazing thing for everyone who's been supporting the Leepa Spring Army tonight. To get to a well-rounded $3,000 is truly incredible. And it's once again a testament to the Leepa Spring Army's ability to continue to persist and fight, to continue to support American and Western interests around the world every single Sunday. So a humongous congrats and thanks to each and every single one of y'all so much once again for getting that fundraiser complete. And with that, folks, I do want to say this really quickly, Matthew, for the tempo tonight. I gotta be honest, I'm hardly hanging it. I hate to bring that up on air, but I can't text you this because this would take too much mental effort. Let's try and make the questions really easy. Fun ones more so than anything serious. So that way we can kind of take it easy and just enjoy the last few minutes that we have on air with all of y'all before we're off air until the 1st of November. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we did have some super chats that came in tonight, and we got several here. The first ones are from Tom Xman, and he wants me to read them all off in one big go, and he puts in a combined about $25 or $30 support, and a huge shout to you, Tom, for that support. He said, have safe travels, Enforcers, and here's a good video for you to watch. The F-Series diesel takes over steam engines, and also, he said, take a look at the history of spiral figure 8 tunnels, and also another fun video for the LSA's day off, a Marmot Amazing Animals video, and also another one. He has another video. He said the Raising the Kursk biography channel, as well as the Soviet Union's deadly abandoned nuclear generators, another great video, and also the Theodore Roosevelt, and also he said, we'll miss you, Enforcers.
Oh, those are some really cool ideas. And you know something that's crazy is that I actually have read so much about the original F units that replaced steam back in the day. A lot of y'all are going to know these because many people still say that they are the prettiest engines that were ever made in the diesel era. And generally, folks, I'd have to say the folks who say that aren't that far off. I think this is the prettiest sort of an engine that was ever made, at least for the streamlining and aerodynamics of it. It was a beautiful, beautiful train, or beautiful locomotive more so. And I've read about these things so much. I read a book actually about the history of diesel engines, and it started way back with the well, not even before that. It started way back in the diesel engine itself, and then eventually how it was implemented in railroading, which was really cool. But I absolutely love these. These are so pretty, and all of the different paint jobs that they came in were so neat. Like, let's see. Here's a couple of them actually. Here's the Rio Grande paint scheme for the F unit. That one's pretty cool. Here's the Western Pacific paint scheme. This one was pretty nice too. Then I don't actually know. That's Amtrak Rainbow era actually. It said it at the bottom. And that one's a Rock Island, rip Rock Island. But still, I love the paint jobs, and I also love the units themselves. They were just really, really nice looking. And I just thought they were so neat. They were so cool. But beyond that, I thank you massively for support, Tom X-Men. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, a big shout out to 42 versus 42, who put in an $11 super chat and said, "Have a great trip, guys, and Slav Ukraine."
And we will have a great trip, hopefully. I'm driving the truck, and I'm really excited about that on one hand, and I'm also kind of scared that that's going to get old really quick on the other. But hopefully it will all turn out well, and we will be in Salt Lake before y'all even know it. So a huge thanks to y'all so much once again, and you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one. Also, Miss Disa52 said, "What is the soundtrack for the drive?" It's everything. It's everything. But it's
Crab Rave.
Crab Rave.
Yes, Crab Rave on volume 110.
Man, heckin' chungus. Legalized comedy. Legalized comedy.
Honestly, though, not really, though. Like, I don't really listen to a whole bunch of electronic dance music like that. It's not really my thing. I listen to a little bit of everything, but that's not really my main genre right there. Honestly, I feel ashamed to say the music I listen to because it's not my age group's normal music they listen to. And most people are like, damn, like, why are you listening to that? My top ones are Frank Sinatra. You have Coldplay in there as well, like all-time favorite band there. And you have a bunch of oldies, which I'm not even going to start listing all those. There's a whole bunch of them. Love the Frank Sinatra type genre right there. So I like that kind of stuff. Also, the 2000s music is good. I don't really care for the new, like, cheaply produced electronic computer music. Don't really care for that much. I like it when bands actually play their instruments and they're actual musicians instead of just, keyboard tapping type stuff like that. But I do appreciate the other, like, keyboard type music, but it's just not really, like, super artistic, like really playing the instruments.
So my music, speaking of playlist, mine is absolutely insane, and a lot of y'all are gonna be like, "That's not even human to listen to this kind of music." But I listen to, now this is fairly like okay, like this isn't gonna raise eyebrows, but I listen to old American music. And Matthew's probably getting tired of my references to it because I'll be like, "Ring, ring the banjo." I like that good old song. And he's like, he's probably tired of that at this point. Or like Way Down Upon the Swanee River, which is Old Folks at Home. I listen to a lot of old American music, like old American music from the folk era, I guess you could call it. I find that to be neat. And then on the other flip side, I listen to U.S. military music and modern U.S. patriotic music. And then I listen to patriotic music of every single country in Europe. And then I also listen to Russian military music, Chinese military music, North Korean military music. Not really Japanese military music because they only have like one song that I know of well, and it's kind of okay. And then I listen to, let's see, anything else that pops up in between there. But usually it's some sort of historic music or military music or patriotic music of some country somewhere in the world. And that's also why, folks, I'm really good at just pointing it out, is because I actually listen to a lot of those songs just in my free time. So whenever we're listening to a Chinese military song, I'll be like, "That's that song right there and there and there." And that's also why when the North Koreans at the military parade were marching to the song To Serve Russia, I just knew it right off the bat because I've listened to it a couple of times. But I listen to everything, military music, historical music, or patriotic music from any country in the world, because I find it interesting for one to listen to it, because you kind of can learn a lot about how a country wants to portray itself based off of the patriotic music that they put at the forefront of their ideologies or generally their country. So I find listening to all of their music's very interesting and very insightful. So I listen to it not only for that, but generally a decent amount of it's actually pretty good, like really from most every country. So
Have you heard that little number? Have you heard that little number? Can't remember exactly who was the composer, but it was that little joint called "Take Shorty to the Swamp." I think it was by Mozart.
bruh, man, Broward County, where the mountains are made of trash, bruh, and by none other than Sebastian Bach, man. Like, really, I mean, like, truly legendary, like, art right there. Like, the best, only the finest, only the greatest. But still, you know, man, I don't even think we can say that guy's name without, like, raising some eyebrows, but yeah, he's something else. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, it looks like people know who I'm talking about, by the way. Yeah. Some people know who I'm talking about. That's crazy right there. That's wild. Yeah. Honestly, like, I'm not going to make any comments like on that right there. I'll probably offend people or something like that, but it's interesting to say the least. But jumping into our next super chat question here, this one goes to Bruce Lee, who puts in it too. He said, bug assault fund, it keeps flies away. Oh, man.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for helping to keep the flies away. So big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And also, I just saw Thomas D'Orazio say, if you have this interest, I'm curious if you ever listened to the Red Army Assembly from the Soviet era. As much as I like the USSR, I have to admit it was well done. Yes, I have. I've listened to a lot of their music, especially from that era. And one of my favorite songs from that era would be Rostov-on-Don, which is about the city of Rostov-on-Don in World War II. One thing that's really interesting, though, and I will give credit to the Soviets more so from the music side of things, they always emphasized in their music a feeling of power. Like just from the songs themselves and the way that they're composed, you can pretty much just imagine like a swarm, like a wave pretty much, just sweeping across the battlefield, which is a pretty interesting sort of an image to portray in people's heads just based off of how the song is composed. So yeah, I have listened to that. I find that music to be really good. Like, don't like the Russians, I hate the Soviet Union and heavily dislike the Russian government and the Russian Federation as a whole. But one thing I will say is that the music is actually pretty decent that they have as a nation, like as patriotic music at least. I find a lot of American music, patriotic music, to be wildly good, which is a shame that a lot of it isn't listened to, because America has as strong of musics and compositions as the Russians do. It's just that it's never brought up to the forefront. Like let's see here, what's that song? Born by the Red, White, and Blue and God Bless the USA are like the two only patriotic songs that exist in America now. And I'm going to give you all a hot take. I think both of those songs suck so bad. I just hate them so much. They've been overplayed, and not only that, they're very uncreative. Like, it's literally like a board got together in a room, and they were like, how do we write these lyrics to attract specific population brackets to buy this album? And that's how they came up with the song. There's no creativity or ingenuity to it at all, and I just cannot stand them for that. There's so many better songs, like God Bless America and Columbia, the Gem of the Ocean, and Battle Cry of Freedom, and millions of others that are so good, and they're so powerful, and they're so inspirational sounding, and they're never played, and most people don't even know about them and have never even heard about them. But anyways,
I think I'd rather listen to R. Kelly and Diddy before I listen to Russian patriotic music. I would rather listen to pretty much anything.
what the hell, bro? Some of us are world patriotic music enjoyers, man. And that taught me a lot about the Russians before the war, like their mindset and everything. Because their mind, like a national mindset is usually emphasized through their songs. So you can learn a lot about them. Also, from just reading the lyrics of their songs too, you can learn a lot about what they're wanting to portray or what they're wanting their people to even believe as well. So it teaches you a lot.
Also, by the way, speaking of Diddy and R. Kelly, was Jeffrey Epstein ever a musician? Was that just bullcrap, or was that actually real? Because I'd heard there was like rumors that it was either that lady he was hooked up with or connected with or something, or he was a musician or something at some point. Was that him?
I don't know. I actually do not know. I have no clue on that one, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know either, to be honest with you. I might be getting mixed up with somebody else possibly that played instruments or something like that. I'm not sure. Someone said no Diddy. Somebody said I don't know. It looks like a lot of people saying. Somebody said it was real. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like, who knows about that guy right there? He's a real one, bad one.
Man, I heard that he was able to he wasn't really a composer, but he was really good at putting pages together. You know, pages of info and data, like a music score almost. But that wasn't that good. Like it also, it was very questionable apparently. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kittens, who puts in a 2. Thank you very much, Kittens, for that support. They said, who's in charge of the music on the trip? And nobody is, actually, because I'm driving my own vehicle, and the enforcer is driving the van. So it's a convoy. It's a trucking convoy, as you could say. So nobody's in charge of nothing. It's decentralized. But enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to agree, it is decentralized. And before we move on to the next one, I saw Michael McMahon say the songs courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue and God Bless the USA were created as a response to 9/11. I do know that, but at the same time, I just still don't like their compositions and also the songs and also how much they're overplayed. Like, there's such a variety of patriotic music out there, and a lot of and I just think a lot of it, composition wise and lyrically and just melodically, is so much better than those two songs. And I just don't know why those have caught on, because every time I think of America, like, to be honest with y'all, every time I think of America and those patriotic songs come up, those patriotic songs with how they sound, how they're sung, it brings up the idea of like some dude in a pontoon boat waving around sprinklers wearing like a straw hat as it says, man, I love this damn country. And like, that's a fine image to bring up here and there, but for every single time we want to portray the country, I'm like, is that really the best, like, kind of like sort of image that we can always portray? Like, why don't we portray the country like as some sort of a grand republic, like this amazing ideology, like a strong force, like it used to be portrayed, like in songs like Columbia, Gem of the Ocean, or God Bless America, or any one of those songs like that. Like, those represent the country the way they're composed in like the strong and powerful way. It isn't like this deal that's like heavily emphasized nowadays with how music is made about the country, where it feels really like, honestly, it doesn't even feel like national. It feels more individualist. And I think that national patriotic music should always be more collectivist in nature, because it's not representing the individual, it's representing the nation, which is made up of these millions of people as a single unit. And I don't think modern patriotic music conveys that at all. But anyways, with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to none other than NJ Beast, who said, my question is that if and when that missile explodes, would that be considered a nuclear attack due to the fact that it's nuclear powered?
If it exploded over the United States, the answer would be yes. If it exploded over any country rather than Russia, the answer would be yes. But if it does that in international waters, they generally get away with it. So I hope that does address that the best we can. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to D. Lowe, who said, do you think a coup in the Kremlin is coming? And if the economic and military situation doesn't improve?
I don't really know. And I would say that I generally lean towards not believing that that's going to be a high likelihood of happening, because they've been able to consolidate power in the Russian government so well. There really isn't a chance of a high, of a likely coup happening at this point, at least in my opinion. If one happens, I will be wildly surprised, but at this point, I generally believe that the chance of a coup against Putin is somewhat low. But with that, I hope that does address that the best we can, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so, folks, for the final question before we go off air until the 1st of November, it is time. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Baja Blast, who said, any news on the Russian nuclear fleet amassing in the Arctic?
Yes, we actually did hear about that. It appears that the Russian Federation is trying to build up their nuclear attack forces in the area, or at least nuclear-powered attack forces, so that way they can start to cut off major shipping lanes for at least NATO in the outbreak of a major war. And so, with that, I hope that does address that well. And folks, at the top of the hour, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I have to say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to have been able to run the stream for all 100,000 of y'all who have watched the stream in less than 2 hours tonight. And we are once again greatly appreciative to know that many of y'all consider the Enforcer channel to be your primary source of news. Well, of course, once again, to remind everyone, we are going to be off air from tomorrow up until Friday, as we will be moving the Enforcer headquarters from Birmingham, Alabama to Salt Lake City. I have to thank every single one of y'all so much for being here with us. A lot of y'all have been here with us since Enforcer HQ 1.0, which was inside of the basement of our parents' house. Then a lot of y'all joined us during the time of Enforcer HQ 2.0, where we have actually been able to have our own studio and generally our own place to be able to operate this out of 24/7 and focus entirely on it. Now y'all will be joining us for the next phase, Enforcer HQ 3.0. Which is going to be, hopefully, a significant improvement from the current headquarters. I have to say that while we are very excited and more than happy to move to Salt Lake City, Utah, and hopefully meet a load of the members of the Lee Spring Army who call Utah their home, I also have to say a huge thanks to all of my friends personally here from the state of Alabama who have joined the Lee Spring Army and been with us largely since its very first formative days. I've got to say that it's a wonderful thing to know that the enforcers can always call the United States home, and that pretty much in every single corner of the United States and every corner of the Western world, someone out there knows who the enforcers are. We greatly appreciate y'all and thank y'all for being here with us for the past 1,341 days, and we hope that y'all will rejoin us here on the 1,347th day when we come back on this Saturday to be able to cover the next, I don't even know how many hours that will be, of the news from around the world. And so with that, folks, thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all on this upcoming Saturday on the 1st of November. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, Ram Slava, long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And folks, we will see you on November the 1st. That is 4 days off the air and 4 days without any content going on the channel. But you can keep up with us on the Twitter page over there on Twitter at the Enforcer, or at sorry, at It's the Enforcer. That's where you can find us on Twitter, by the way. And you can find us reposting all the news over there and keeping up with the happenings. So that way we can be up to speed when we come back on Saturday and be able to jump right back into it. So you can keep up with us over there. And in the meantime, though, thank you all once again for joining us tonight, all 101,000 viewers, and thank you all once again for having another successful fundraiser yet again tonight on Sunday. So, of course, thank you all once again, and of course, Slava LSA, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.